Welcome to Boston Children's Answers. I'm your host, Dr. Jennifer Arnold. As a mom and a doctor, I'm passionate about helping kids stay healthy and happy. So join me as I chat with other Boston Children's experts to find answers for you and your family. Hi, everyone, and welcome back. Today, we're going to talk about the importance of exercise for a healthy heart. Here's today's parent question.
Hi, my name is Sandy. It's been hard to get my preteen to exercise ever since she stopped playing youth sports. How can I help her understand the benefits of exercise, not just for now, but for the rest of her life, without adding too much pressure?
Here to join us today and talk about this important topic is Dr. Naomi Gauthier, who is director of our Boston Children's Cardiac Fitness Program. Welcome, Dr. Gauthier.
Thank you
for
much.
Coming.
Nice to be here.
Nice to be here with you as well. I sensed when we were chatting before, you have such passion for this topic today. And I'm curious if you could help our audience understand, how you got into this specialty.
Sure. Well, a bit of a journey like many things in life. Pediatrics was clear to me from when I was little. But I actually didn't discover my full specialty, pediatric cardiology, until I started my training. And then it was just such a amazing intersection between the way the body works, which still fascinates me, as well as the ability to watch children really grow up. And it's that growth and development and blossoming that that sparked my interest in pediatrics in the beginning. So that all kind of pooled together in pediatric cardiology, which is my background specialty. And then I actually came to exercise cardiology partway into my career, realizing that one of my, perhaps maybe my driving passion is to watch children really fully blossom. And in order to do that, they need to play and be active. And then I realized, two and two together, I need to be an expert in that. And so I dove deep.
Wow. So, exercise cardiology. It seems like a pretty unique specialty that not many have heard about. Can you tell me a little bit about the field as well?
Well, I suppose I use that term a little loosely because it actually isn't a real field. It's an area of interest or expertise. There really hasn't been much interest or development of it yet. But like many things, the tides are all rising together, and there is now, I would say, an international interest in exercise physiology, which means kind of understanding how exercise and the body work together, and patient care, and pulling that together in this field that we're actually now starting to call exercise medicine or exercise cardiology.
Wow.
So it's exciting.
That is really exciting. Well, that's what I love about being here at Boston Children's is that we are always, there's so much passion for making kids healthier. And you're just an example of that, of focusing on an area and a need and realizing that we need to have expertise and push this to keep kids healthy. So talking about that, having healthy kids, can you share with me a little bit about how important is exercise for our kids to be healthy?
It's, I think, vital. And I think that it often gets tacked on. Like everybody knows exercise is good for your heart and you should eat healthy and you should listen to your mother and all of those good things. But I don't think people really think beyond that. And it's something that I think about every day. So I think exercise is not just about making sure that your heart is healthy when you're older. Now, that's helpful and important, but exercise is really important for the here and now. So exercise for children is important for development, motor development. It's important for healthy bones and socialization, but it's also really important for brain development, learning, academic success. It's really important for focus. It's helpful for mood. People use it to treat anxiety and ADHD. And they're only now just uncovering, as if it's like a scientific revelation.
It's not just physical.
Correct.
It has so many benefits for the here and now.
Absolutely. They've actually done some interesting research looking at what brain chemicals are released. Now, remember, when you're exercising, and there's all sorts of body responses that happen, and one of them is there's these growth factors in the brain that promote all sorts of great healthy things for, like I said, mood and attention and absolute learning. And there's some really sort of fascinating ways of looking at what exercise does from that lens that it makes me want to make sure that no child is left behind in terms of access to and ability to move and exercise.
So along those lines, knowing it's so important for our kids, and as a parent, I kind of want to know the answer to this question. How much exercise should kids and teens be getting or have that
To be healthy,
benefit?
where's that line?
Yeah.
National guidelines say 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous activity a day. Wow. But, yes, that makes it sound daunting.
It does.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking,
Yeah, exactly. So first of all, that doesn't have to be 60 minutes in a row.
Okay.
So you can break it up and you can get credit for what you're doing. And it's true actually for all of us if we're trying to improve our own physical activity and exercise habits. To give ourselves credit for the things that do count. You take the stairs instead of the elevator. And some of the fitness trackers like that people are wearing now, I think are helpful in that they're calculating that in the background. And at the end of the day, you look and you say, oh, wow, I think I got more steps than I was expecting, or I got more exercise than I was expecting. So giving yourself credit for some of those.
Okay.
So that's first of all. Second of all, I think it's getting kids up and moving. It's anything other than sitting. And so honestly, if we can't find 60 minutes somewhere throughout the entire day, waking hours, then we have to really look at what are we doing in our daily lives.
True.
That if you get home from school at 2:30 and you have dinner at 6:30, in 4 hours, are you not getting up 10 minutes out of those for 40 minutes right there? I mean, like if you really kind of break it down, it becomes much less daunting, and those are the edges that I want to soften, is to really think about it that way. And I think one of the things that I really like to hammer home too is that if you're really not engaged in much activity because of the way your life is right now, you can get there in steps. You can do 10 minutes a day if you're doing 0. That's 10 more minutes. You can then move it to 15. You can move it to 20. So small wins, micro wins sometimes. And so motivation. So I think really understanding that there's a nice guideline goal.
Okay.
But raising awareness that asking the question, are you actually moving? And is my child actually moving? And then recognizing, is it more or less than we are aware of? Awareness is the absolute first step, and that's a win. The next step is then to make some impacts on, oh gosh, you know what? Kind of not. Let's figure out how we can weave it into our day. I'm super practical.
Yeah, you get it.
Yes, I get it. So it's figuring out those ways that you give credit for what's already happening and also incrementally work toward any goal.
And build from there. And it sounds like you said that, even standing counts.
Standing is important, and standing counts for a lot of reasons. It's not really the same thing as kind of physical activity. So you really have to be moving to really kind of consider it to be physical activity.
Okay.
Exercise is a specific subset of physical activity, which is really sort of planned and structured. So I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to do a sport. I'm going to do a dance. I'm going to ride my horse. They're very specific, structured. This is how I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to get stronger, or I'm going to get better at this skill set. Where physical activities, I'm going to go play tag, or I'm going to go for a nice walk or whatever. All super important. You don't have to be a part of an organized activity or even go to a gym to get exercise, because you can do, like, you can play tag with your kids and get to the point where your heart rate is elevated and you're breathing hard and fast and getting a little bit sweaty. That counts as exercise, even though it's not necessarily in the moment. If it seems more playful, it still counts as moderate to vigorous physical activity that leads you to that that goal of being active.
So then, can you just remind us clearly, like exercise and what types of exercise are important to look at versus physical activity?
So if we're shooting for that goal of 60 minutes of physical activity a day, some of that is at a vigorous level, which means you're moving enough to really feel like your heart rate's getting kind of pumping, you're breathing a little hard and fast. If I was to have this conversation, I would kind of be like having difficulty getting the words out. So you're not able to have a full sentence. That is a level that we like to see people at as part of that moderate to vigorous physical activity at least 3 days a week, if not more. From a daily practical standpoint, I would just say get at that level, and I wouldn't worry too much about how you would categorize that. Bone strengthening, muscle strengthening, and aerobic strengthening, meaning that you're kind of getting your heart pumping and breathing faster. Those are all the goals of being stronger. So that's things where you're walking, climbing. You're using some muscles to kind of get your body engaged. And get the blood kind of pumping.
And keeping those
going. It could be low level where you could have this whole conversation. It could be high level where it would be hard to talk. And it's that range that we're talking about. And I think a little less important to say, was that actually count as exercise or does that actually count as physical activity?
Yeah. So it's having that continuum.
The continuum and getting some in the zone where you are kind of like really out there moving and you're not, as they say, dogging it.
Yeah. That makes sense. Now I'm attuned, right? So like you said, awareness is the first piece. And so looking at, how much time are they getting that continuum of physical activity? What are some of the risks if we're not getting to that goal of just in general enough activity and exercise?
There's a growing body of research looking into sedentary activity. So that's the exact opposite. And that's literally like sitting and not moving. Like
what we're doing right now.
Like what we're doing right now. Sitting on the couch, moving your thumbs doesn't count. Sorry. Exactly. Joystick doesn't count. So if you are not engaging in exercise, you are therefore not getting the benefits that we talked about. So there's the bone strengthening, the muscle strengthening, the getting your heart circulating, pumping the blood to your brain so you don't get as much of the your own potential for your academic success, for your focus, for your mood. So you're not gaining any of those benefits. And you are setting yourself up potentially for health concerns. Maybe not in the short term, which is why a lot of kids unfortunately have a sedentary habit.
Yeah.
But then, they go to a birthday party or they go to gym class and it may not be apparent yet because they have a lot of reserve. Hopefully they're healthy. And so if they have a lot of reserve, you might not necessarily see that you've had a decline until you get to be older. The other risks is that oftentimes when you're not exercising, you are also then engaging in other habits that aren't so healthy. You're not mindfully eating. You're snacking.
Yeah.
You're spending too much screen time, which has a lot of eye and brain effects. You're not necessarily engaging socially.
Yeah.
So you're engaging in parallel habits that also have considerable risks in terms of your growth, development, and health.
The downsides of that. It's that's really important. And I think as parents, we want to allow our kids to have those activities that they enjoy, which may not be very physical, but we want to make sure there's balance and that they're still seeing the value of things that get them away from the screens and get them active. And I find that pretty hard at times to help encourage my kids to do that. So how can our parents who want to encourage their kids to do things in that exercise continuum, how can we encourage them to engage in those activities?
I'm so glad you asked me that, to be honest, because it starts to make it feel like you're doing something bad if you're not exercising, as opposed to encouraging to do something that's enjoyable. So it's sort of have a little bit of a negative slant. And then when we say, what should you do? Anytime you start using that word should, it starts to feel like a chore, as opposed to saying, what do you get to do? Which starts to feel like a bit of a gift and a bit of something like, I get to go skiing, or, I should do my homework.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. 100%. You get to go, play tag with the dog outside or something.
Absolutely. Yes. The sun is shining. I get to go outside.
Yes.
So that's actually one of the first things, is to identify when you're using that language of, I should go, practice my dance routine. And even if it's something that they enjoy.
Yeah.
And catching that and saying, how about if you say, guess what? You get to go practice. And just learning to kind of catch yourself say that is reframe can be really, really powerful. It's a really important mindfulness technique. So I think that's one thing parents can do, is recognize in their own voice. And I think, as a matter of fact, I was thinking about this just the other day, how we really focus on screen time and say, okay, too much screen time, you have to turn that off and you need to go get active, which makes it sound like you're punishing them and saying like, okay, turn that thing off that you really love and go do this thing that you really don't want to do.
Yeah.
So how do we balance that? Yeah. So I think some of it is...
and I'm guilty of that, by the way, as a parent.
Aren't we all? Aren't we all? Absolutely. So I think it's the same thing, being aware and then recognizing, like, how do you introduce something as... hey, you know what, you only have 10 more minutes left of your screen time. At the end of that 10 minutes, I have a great idea. How about if we do this? As opposed to, it is your time to go do your chore. You need to exercise now.
Yes.
But instead to reframe it and say, whether it's something you do together. So one thing is making it be about a social activity. So whether it's something that you do as a family, which is really wonderful, or whether it's something that they get to do with friends, which especially depending on the age can be particularly powerful. There's a lot of ways that you can just reframe getting up and moving and being active.
Yeah, I think that whole idea of being creative and reframing, how we look at physical activity with our kids is so important. And I liked what you said about getting involved with your kids, because I think that's really hard as a parent. We're so busy. I've been trying to also be a little bit more mindful as a parent. And when I notice it's been from morning to night and I haven't done anything with my kids, when you realize I need to do something fun with my kids, choose something that is active, and then you get the benefit of both spending time that's so important and critical, and then also everyone gets a little bit of activity and help.
Absolutely. And there's so many different ways to do that. You could be a family that just likes to do a goofy dance party or
which can be done inside.
Absolutely. Or
do a TikTok.
Play Twister. Yeah, do a TikTok. Absolutely. So I think understanding, even as the parent, how much it benefits yourself.
Yes.
Not just the activity, but the engagement with your child. And then the ability to let loose a little bit in a playful way can make such a difference in your day.
Yeah, it's so important.
I mean, my days are so much brighter when I go in and see a patient and I, you're picking up the babies or you're getting around and, playing with the kids, and you just feel so refreshed.
Yeah.
And when you pair that with being physically active, it sends all that blood to your brain. It's a lot of feel good.
It's a lot of good.
It's a lot of good.
I love that. So you talked a little bit about the risks of kids not getting enough exercise today. Is that in fact actually happening to our kids? Are they not getting enough, exercise to help them with their health today?
Actually, yes, that's true. The statistics are pretty clear. Less than a quarter of kids are actually meeting those guidelines that we talked about. Wow. And there's been a consistent drop through the years. There's also a decline as kids get older. So this is something that I actually worry a lot about. When kids are younger, they tend to play. The way our sort of society is organized now is all around organized activities. So you're either signing up for a sport or a community activity, or you're going to karate, or you're something where you're doing something that is, at 3:00 on Tuesday, as opposed to going outside and playing with the kids in the neighborhood or whatever. That just doesn't happen as much anymore. And so if you're not involved in those, then there's often no alternative. And so as kids hit a certain age, the athletic ones start to become apparent. It becomes clear who has, really a natural inclination and tendency with that skill. And then there's all of us mortals who don't. And so, exactly. So for those, then what are their alternatives? So as they get a little bit older, you're not doing those activities anymore. And they don't get replaced with something else that's active. They get replaced with other things like video games or socialization in a different way, but it's not active. This is particularly true of girls. And there's a pretty strong movement to try to help to engage girls in specific to not drop out of sport or activity. Because there's even less opportunity for girls than there are for boys, although both are affected. And then when you add in a medical condition, then we get to an entirely different level. So for all of these reasons, as well as things like access to safe spaces, not everybody has safe outdoor green spaces or indoor spaces, or cultural issues. There's certainly a lot of disparities between communities. Kids need the same access to being healthy and active, but they may not have it, and therefore they may not have the same access to the health benefits.
Yeah, no, I think that makes all the sense in the world. I think life is different now for kids, right? I don't see kids playing outside anymore. My kids don't really go outside much just to run around like I did as a kid, and they're losing out on that, and we have to figure out how to fill that gap if it's not there. And
absolutely. And I think it's that recognition, that awareness, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
You actually have to sort of actively think about it and then find ways, I think as a parent, if you're trying to influence how you can help your kids be healthy, you can start thinking, let's have an active birthday party, not a passive birthday party.
Yes.
In other words, we go to somewhere where we're doing something active, or you organize a play date around something that has to do with movement or being active.
Meet at the park instead
Meet at the
of
park, yeah. Exactly. Walk and talk,
Yep.
as opposed to sit and talk.
Yes, especially as you get older. Like the park is no longer an option for my kids as much, so I'm trying to figure out what can we do that keeps you active. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's hard. It gets harder and harder. Oh.
There are also activities that people don't always think of, like there are hiking clubs and there are, there's scouting. I mean, honestly, give self credit for if you're doing that, usually doing something active. So there are a number of ways that people really connect those dots to say this activity has movement or exercise, physical activity as part of it, then connecting those dots and making like, oh, that's 2 reasons why I'd sign up for that.
Yeah. So important, to think especially when you're also limited with time, when you're trying to decide what things to choose.
Oh, a twofer is always important as a mom.
Yes, exactly. Efficiency.
Yes, 100%. Yes.
So, here at Boston Children's, we take care of so many kids who have medical complexity. And obviously, as a neonatologist, I have a lot of patients that I send home who have medical complexity. My own kids have medical complexity. I have medical complexity. I'm curious for those who have either a chronic medical condition or have some type of medical complexity, how do we encourage exercise for them? Do they need to meet the same standards or goals? How can we be creative? And I think that because my daughter, who is a little person like myself, and much more physically capable than I am, to be honest, but she also has a diagnosis of ADHD. And so, part of the recommendations to help her manage her attention deficit is to exercise more and get active more. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about that patient population a little bit, if you could.
Absolutely. How much time we got?
Okay, we got all the time in the world.
So earlier you asked, what happens, what are the risks if you don't exercise? And I think one of the questions that I ask all the time are who may not have access to exercise, may not have the same resources. And that's not just, as we say, social determinants of health. Do they have safe spaces and safe homes and food and really important things? But this medically complex group, because I think people have this misconception that because you may have diagnoses or you may have, something that's either visible by your size or visible by a scar or not so visible, say like diabetes, that's a group that should be thought of differently and pushed aside. And I think that's exactly the wrong message. As a matter of fact, my whole goal is to say, if anything, they need it more.
Yes.
And
thank you.
You're welcome. Yes. Where's my soapbox? The key is to modify. Everybody can do something. Everybody can.
Yeah.
It's just trying to find their own best self. Where are they? Meet them there. And then how can they do as much as within their realm? And actually, oftentimes they surprise you at how much they actually can do. And I think there are some really very famous paradigms that show that off, say the Paralympics. So that's, an example of people who may have a particular challenge or disability in one way and an absolutely elite level talent in another.
So true.
There's also things like the Special Olympics, which is a different kind of population that showcases, again, how people can be brought together and really perform at high levels. I mean, that goes all the way to the International Special Olympics like that. So those are some real competitors.
Absolutely.
And then there's also things that have trickled into the community, like more recently things like unified sports, where you have students who are more traditionally developing and students who may not have the same development, and they're paired together to, say, play soccer, like unified soccer or basketball, which is wonderful for both sets. I love that too.
Yeah.
So there are some people who are sort of thinking along those lines and trying to enable the ability, but still, so many of them are sitting on the sidelines, and that absolutely breaks my heart.
Yeah.
So I think
they're missing out on all those benefits.
100%.
And it's not just the physical too, right? Then it's the social, and it's learning how to engage in that sort of activity with peers.
Absolutely. And so the key is to say, how do we rethink that paradigm? How do we, within the medical system, help set that safety level? Because clearly safety is paramount. It really should be something that is truly enjoyable, and everybody should get those benefits.
Yeah.
It's also okay, I think, for children with different levels of medical complexity to feel competitive if they want to. There's nothing wrong with little juices flowing.
Yep.
But also to just have enjoyment, pure on enjoyment, if they don't have a competitive bone in their body, but they just love the spirit of togetherness, it's beautiful.
Yes, very.
So yes, the basketball, you watch some of the Special Olympics and some of the basketball players will help the other team to score their own, basket. Or it's just beautiful.
Yep.
So the idea is to set that safety level and then find ways to say, this is really important, because if they are excluded either because the health system didn't set them up for success and didn't help to know those boundaries, and then don't help enable schools, communities, families to say, hey, guess what? This is something that we can do. Everybody can do something.
Yes.
It's not about what you can't.
No.
It's all about what you can do.
Well, and I think you just brought something home to me as medical, professionals. We have to be able to help parents figure that out and encourage that, because I can tell you, I was the kid who did not go to PE, and I missed out on a lot. And I think now with my kids, literally, we just went to see our orthopedic surgeon here at Boston Children's, and Will, my son, wants to play football. Okay, football may not be the best thing. That might be his limitation, right? But she said, there's so many other things you could do, and she suggested lacrosse. And I was like, lacrosse? I'm like, are you sure? Like, I got nervous about that. And she was like, no, he can do lacrosse. Will was so excited. He now plays lacrosse. He loves it. And I can tell you, from the mom perspective, he made a goal, his first goal. And, we had a conversation with the coach. They were very supportive, inclusive. He got to play with everybody else. And he made that first goal. And do you know what happened? The kid from the opponent's team gave him a high five. I was like, okay, this is what it's all about.
That is exactly what it's all about. Now, there's so many stories in there. So first of all, he's getting the benefits physically, and he's getting the socialization, and he's gaining confidence. Yes. And that to me is critical, because a lot of children with medical complexity, I think sometimes the diagnosis kind of rises to the top, as opposed to, I have a diagnosis, and oh, by the way, I'm a child too. Yeah. And by then recognizing that there are things that you can wear proudly, and that you can succeed, and it's something that is that obvious. There was no goal, now there is a goal. There was no high five, now there is a high five. Yeah. That is to me what it's all about. It was a beautiful story. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I get so excited about this.
Yes,
okay.
Exactly. Your sort of example reminded me of one of the really, I think, most fascinating examples of why physical activity is so important. There's a school in the Chicago suburbs that had kids who they realized they were looking through, and they had kids who weren't succeeding very well, and they realized it was because of their literacy, that they really needed some help with their reading. So they had to give them additional help with literacy, so they had this literacy class. But in order to do that, they had to give up something, and what they took away was gym. But in Illinois, gym class at the time was mandatory. So they asked their gym teacher, could you do this before school at 7 a.m.? So he started, this is what they called 0-hour PE. But this gym teacher, he thought, I really think that we're onto something. I think that I can make my students smarter by exercising them. So they did the cool. 0-hour PE, but he said, I will do it on one condition. You have to do the literacy class directly after gym. I want to prime them and then do the literacy class. There were certain students who couldn't do that. So they compared at the end of the year the students who couldn't do the early morning and did the literacy class in the afternoon, several hours later, versus the ones who took it right in the morning. The ones who took it right in the morning directly after almost doubled their improvements. So then they did another experiment where they did the same thing, like maybe it's the afternoon, you're tired or whatever. So then they did 2 PE classes again when it was paired directly. You move around, get that blood flowing, get yourself juiced, and then you set your brain to learning. Yep. They both equally improved tremendously. And that changed the entire school. They now had this whole different way of approaching all of school. And that school went from, one of those sort of middle range schools to the top performing school. They took this international exam, and that school performed number 1 in science and number 6 in math in the world.
Whoa.
The only thing they changed was this commitment to everybody moving in a certain way and tying that with their learning.
It's like a recipe. It's like you can enhance your learning if you're physically active before. I mean, it's just, we all need to be working on that and thinking about how we approach, our learning.
The gym teacher said, I got their brains primed and ready, and the teachers filled them.
Wow. That's
and
incredible.
So to me, that's a good example. So if you say, what are the, if you are not participating and then these children who have medically complex issues, they already have enough other challenges.
Yes.
Why are we giving them like less
Keeping
of a
them
leg
set
up.
back.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly.
And that's not even talking about all of the beautiful health benefits of exercise for the here and now, let
Yeah.
alone for lifelong. Now, as a cardiologist, my particular health population or my particular medical population tends to be the ones that we do have some concern about. Is it safe and is it healthy? So we have ways of looking at that and devising that. And it's always about what can you do. If there's limitations, you modify.
That's
If
right.
there's areas that might not be so safe, you stay within the guardrails. Doesn't mean you don't do it.
What I'm hearing is exercise is always possible.
Yes.
You know, it's always possible, regardless of the condition. You just may have to do it a little different
Exactly.
or modify it.
Exactly. I'm sure that as in your home,
Oh, yeah.
you can't reach things high. You modify, right? You
Yep.
it's not that you can't have
No.
your life.
Just do
You
it different.
have to do it.
Yeah, that's like good advice for all of us and everything.
Absolutely.
And why should exercise be any different?
Exactly.
We all should enjoy those benefits.
I really believe that strongly.
That's really great. All right, so I want to sort of take us now to the cardiac fitness program. Tell us a little bit about this program specifically.
Sure. So our cardiac fitness program is a 3-month medically supervised exercise program, fitness program. It's built off of a cardiac rehab program like adults do, so I think that might help people kind of understand a little bit about it. But our population are not like adults who've had, say, a heart attack or something like that they're trying to recover from. Our patients are born with what they're born with, so they really need to be given an opportunity to show how they can flourish. And so that's why we call it the fitness program, and it's fitness both in body and in mind. So we really believe in what we call the 4 pillars of fitness. And again, we modify. So if they have real challenges, they can have artificial pacemakers. They've had lots of open heart surgeries. They may have all sorts of challenges. Doesn't mean they can't get that heart pumping. We don't do, take them to the operating room so that we can say,
Yeah.
look what we did, so that they can then go out and use what they've got.
They need to be able to use it.
So
yes.
aerobic strength, that's really important for all, muscle and bone strengthening, flexibility for a whole host of reasons, and then a positive mindset. So those 4 pillars are what we train specifically. We don't expect the biceps to get stronger unless we teach somebody how to use their biceps.
Yep.
They don't expect the positive mindset to develop unless we help people recognize, not should, but get. Or things along those lines. So we take them through a 3-month program. We have very talented, highly skilled exercise physiologists at Boston Children's who are trained in congenital heart disease and in our heart center patient population. So they know how to understand the safety levels. And then they can teach the patient and the family safe exercise practices that are also effective. Because if you hold back too much, then you are missing out on many benefits. So where is that line, and how do we know? So we teach them that over 3 months with the idea that they then develop independent habits that they can go carry for a lifetime.
That's incredible. I mean, it's just so important, and you've been able to find with this population of kids who maybe others would have been afraid to allow them to exercise or to encourage that.
Absolutely.
I shouldn't say allow, right? Encourage. I'm learning. Change the way we think about it.
Yeah.
And that's just so critical to keeping them healthy.
Absolutely. And
hearts
for
and muscles
themselves to
too.
think that exactly for themselves. And as a parent, your job is to protect from the beginning. And if you have a little baby, especially a baby who's born with a heart condition, but it can be any medical complexity or any child really.
Yep.
And you are there to make sure that they stay safe, but also grow and develop. That's a hard enough job when you don't have medical complexity. And then
Yes.
certainly from my population, when you have a heart kid, how do you know how to do that? So our job is to both keep them safe, but also to help encourage their full potential. As a matter of fact, our motto is find your possible. And that's really what we believe in, is that you meet them where you are and you help them find that possible. And sometimes we are blown away at what these kids can do. Yeah, and actually it's not just kids, it's adults too. So we take all ages for patients who have, so our heart center patients actually span all ages. So it's not just kids, but it's the adults who've grown up with their heart condition as well.
I wonder if it's worthwhile for our audience too to explain sort of what are the types of patients that you have in our heart program, and what is a congenital heart, condition.
Oh, sure, yeah. So a congenital heart condition, some people call it defect disease, it's really all the same thing, is a structural issue where the heart did not form correctly, or how well it functions, or in some cases how well the wiring, the conduction system, the ability for the electrical part of the heart, how that formed, or genetic conditions that can be related to those. And every once in a while, it can be something that that was acquired, an unfortunate illness or a side effect that that somehow affected their hearts at a very young age. But much more, it's within the congenital heart condition category, which being born with something about your heart that is different is actually the number one birth defect. It's actually about 1 in 100 babies. It's way more common than most things that we see.
Yeah, I don't think many realize that, just how common it is. It's likely all of us have had someone in our family or close friend circle that has had a child with a.
If you think about how many kids are in your kid's grade, and 1 in 100 is going to have something, and you say, well, how many kids? If there's 300 kids in your kid's grade, there's probably going to be at least 3 of them with this.
Wow. So along those lines, you started the program here for cardiac fitness. Why did you create it? And are there other programs like this?
I created it because I wanted to show both patients, their families, and the world what they can do and not focus on what they can't do. It's not so much about whether I want them to have a particular level of fitness or that I really want to meet, say, a 60-minute-a-day guideline. All of those things are, of course, important and helpful. But if I had to really boil it down, I really want them to feel empowered. And when they do, they feel that within themselves. Like, I didn't do that sit-up, you did. And it's like that goal. It's like, I did. I just did that. You can't take that away. And they are forever transformed. They are forever changed. And that's what we see. They are literally transformed. And that is within reach for all. Like, even some of our patients who have the most challenges, the most delays, the most issues with heart or lungs or bony structure, or whatever it is, watching them just emerge with what is I can do gets me out of bed every single morning. And so the initial sort of foray into this came from looking my patients in the eye and realizing when they said, well, what can I do? And I realized I needed something tangible. I actually started an overnight camp for kids with heart conditions many years ago, and some of the lessons learned from that I took and put into this program. And then nothing is ever built just by a single person. So while I said that I created this, give credit to my team. So Tracy Curran is our lead exercise physiologist, and she has been my right hand. She is a PhD in exercise physiology here at Boston Children's. And I don't know how many years, at least 20, probably more years here gaining experience specifically in exercise physical activity in congenital heart patients. And so she has really been my right hand. The two of us together have pushed this forward. And then we have a whole team of talented exercise physiologists and other physicians.
That's really great. So I, of course, have to ask, because I think for those listening, we love to hear stories, success stories. And I can only imagine, with this being a relatively innovative, novel, new-ish field and having our own dedicated program, can you share an example of a success story?
There literally are so many of just these stories of transformation. There's actually just a new one, literally just yesterday, one of our patients who was socially challenged, as well as medically challenged, never done any exercise and was a little anti-exercise. And partway through the program, went to do some exercise and realized I would never have tried that before, this person said. And then said, I'm going to try and see if I can do this. Did it successfully, and then broke down crying, saying, I just did something that I never thought was possible. That's just a small example. We have a boy who came from another country, multiple heart-related issues, quite frail, fragile, was blue, and really did have very true limitations to exercise. But the Heart Center team did an amazing job with some heart surgeries and a lot of really hard, good work medically. So was able to make some gains, but still has, significant limitations, significantly blue. And he was able to exercise in a way that he had never, ever done before. And in the end, we were actually doing a little video with him, and I said, hey, you're a video star. And he turned and he looked and he said, no, I'm a fitness star.
Oh my gosh, that's the best.
He is absolutely amazing.
That is
yes.
awesome.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I imagine for your population, you're seeing probably the most challenging, kids in terms of sort of feeling like it's safe. That you're seeing the possible, you're making it happen for them in a safe way, and that's just so important.
We have some kids who have half a heart, born with half a heart. They've had heart surgery to go around, and you watch them, and you're like, oh my gosh. What that kid's doing with half a heart, like, what am I doing? Like, that's so inspiring.
That's right. You can learn, learn from each
yes,
other. And
yes, and so you get motivated. You're like, you're really like inspiring me.
Well, okay, so this has been really great. I wanted to sort of switch gears just a smidge and talk about research. What are some of the things happening from a research perspective? What's on the horizon for fitness in kids?
So much. It's actually exploding. I think the understanding of what exercise does for the body, the brain, the bones, the mood, attention, all of those things are actively being researched in so many different ways. That's going to be a whole nother podcast, because otherwise I'll talk your ear out for the next 2 hours. There's so many things to be learned, and we've had a few that have gotten published recently that look at proving that it is possible. So first of all, saying, can you take this group who are supposedly the ones that are, quote, highest risk, in other words, because of their heart condition that you worry,
they have
highest
risk,
and what actually happens, and being able to graph and show their physical progress, their heart progress, and their empowerment has been really gratifying.
Well, and so important, right? Because if you imagine for children that are seeking advice from their physician, or the parents are nervous, can my child do that? If you have the evidence that says yes, that makes everyone feel comfortable recommending it.
Absolutely, and it's scientifically sound, and it's based on the right principles.
So critical.
Absolutely, and so I think just really starting from the basics. Is it safe? So that was one of our first questions, and we looked at that, and absolutely safe, especially knowing that it's safe and we're pushing people. So it's not just safe because we are bubble wrapping people, but it's safe and it's effective.
Yeah.
So that was the second question. Can we make people more fit in all of the 4 ways that we want them to be more fit? And the answer to that has been yes.
That's great.
And then the next level is, how do we improve our efficiency, and how do we empower the parents? How do we create a program that gives them more tools and not just the participant more tools? How might that impact what their medical testing looks like? How might that impact how well their checkups go? So all of those things are not just our institution, but we really have, we created a global society of interested professionals in this. So we have a group that meets quarterly that are really trying to say, let's all work together and figure out collaboratively, what is the science behind that? What are the gaps in our knowledge? And how do we start answering those? Wow. Because now we all believe it is possible. So let's start to research it from the bottom up.
And once you get that research, we got to get it out there, because that way, parents like myself or clinicians like myself don't hesitate to help, give that anticipatory guidance about and prescribe, this is okay, you can do this, as opposed to, I don't know, maybe you should do that, because you're just afraid of hurting. Exactly. You don't want to harm first.
You don't want to harm first, but seeing what is possible and getting those examples, it's like any, hero or any mentor, when you realize, wow, that's possible too. I mean, you're an example of that, right? Yeah. What's possible? You're a beautiful example of that, right? It's just so important to approach it from a rigorous scientific standpoint, do the research, get the data, and then showcase people what's happening. And actually, I have to say a little word of gratitude myself, because in a way, this podcast is allowing me an opportunity to do that and showcase what I think these kids can show to the world.
Well, that's why I love this podcast, because we get to raise awareness for all these really important things and help to open up everyone's eyes for what's possible. So I appreciate that. So, as we wrap up here, I always like to end with one question for all of our guests, because I love raising awareness for all these topics, because they're all so important for keeping our kids healthy. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you think, our audience needs to know?
In truth, I don't think so, because I think you really help to lead the conversation toward that central message of exercise is important for all of us, and that the benefits are for here and for later, for now and for later. So I think that message came through, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be able to share that.
Oh, well, I am grateful as well. And thank you so much for spending time with us, for sharing all of your knowledge and expertise, and helping to inspire us to help our kids to be healthier. So that brings us to the last part of our show, one of my favorite parts of the show, where we actually do what's called doctor's orders. And this is an opportunity where you, as our expert, can prescribe an action that our parents can use to help them raise their kids in a healthier way. So I'm curious today, Dr. Gauthier, if you could share with us your doctor's orders on this topic.
Absolutely. Well, I'm all about action, so I love the fact that this is an opportunity to provide an action. And if I could prescribe one first step, it is that awareness. Are we engaging in it? Are we getting the benefits? And if we are not engaging in it, are we missing out on the benefits? And then how can we, in a fun and really, truly joyful way, how can we then find ways to be active? Then I think that is a huge win.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. Thanks everyone for listening, and a special thank you to our guest parent Sandy and our guest expert Dr. Naomi Gauthier. If you want to hear more, subscribe to our show wherever you get your podcasts to stay up to date on the latest episodes. Want to learn more? Check us out at bostonchildrens.org or find us at Boston Children's Hospital's social media pages. Well, that's a wrap. Thank you everyone for listening in, and see you next month.